Hi, everyone, I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Camp.
Ready to take your plea?
Yeah! I'll kill it all you do. I hope you die in prison as well.
First, we head to Pahrump Justice in Nevada. The defendant is 19-year-old Jim Fritz. He's been charged with throwing a substance at a moving vehicle. 10 months earlier, Fritz was outside a community center when he saw a sheriff's officer driving by in his marked police vehicle. That's when Fritz allegedly threw a rock, striking the vehicle and causing $1,800 worth of damage. The officer was unhurt and Fritz was quickly arrested. Methamphetamine was later found in his system. While in custody, Fritz had several additional charges brought against him, including 6 counts of battery and acts related to human excrement. Today, the defendant is waiting to see the judge on some of his pending charges. Because of his mental health issues, he's wearing a green anti-suicide smock. While another inmate's case is being heard, Fritz glances over at a court officer when, suddenly, without provocation, Fritz lunges at the officer, who had just escorted him into the court. The two men grapple in a doorway before the deputy gets Fritz in a headlock. A second officer sprints onto the scene to lend a hand. He also makes sure none of the other inmates get any bold ideas. The deputy has things under control. As you can see, Fritz's shackled feet at the bottom of the screen. Neither Fritz nor the officer were injured in the incident. The defendant was later charged with battery on a protected person and battery by a prisoner. He pled guilty to both charges and was sentenced to 24 to 96 months in prison. Next, we're in Steubenville, Ohio, for the sentencing of Antonio Clifford. The 20-year-old pled guilty to multiple charges, including aggravated robbery and aggravated murder, for killing 28-year-old Joshua Sweat during an alleged drug deal. A year earlier, Sweat was reportedly trying to buy drugs outside of a bar. He was... Now at sentencing, members of the victim's family, still reeling from the murder, addressed Clifford directly through their victim impact statements.
You had so many different options. You could have beaten up, knocked him unconscious, or at worst, shot him somewhere else that would not have been deadly. But instead, you shot him in the back of the head, execution style.
To be told that your own son has been murdered is a crushing blow that I would not wish on anyone. You chose to shoot him in the back of the head and end his life for just a couple of $100.
Next, the witness seat is open for the victim's father to share his statement. But he doesn't make it that far. Just off camera, Mike Sweat jumps across the table and grabs his son's killer by the throat. As one officer tries to pull him away from behind, another attempts to pry his hands off the defendant. As the struggle continues, Sweat's daughter rushes in and tries to pull the officer off her dad. Then back on his feet, a bloodied Sweat struggles against 3 officers. Eventually, he's subdued and placed in cuffs. But he still has a few words for Clifford. Just as deputies get one situation under control, a family member of the defendant begins yelling at the victim's family. The two families are taken out through separate exits, and the victim's father was held in custody until he calmed down. Mike Sweat was not charged with the courtroom outburst. As for Antonio Clifford, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 33 years for the murder of Joshua Sweat.
And I didn't save her.
Next, we go to a hearing in Miami, Florida. The defendant, Alvarez, is charged with possession of cocaine. The arrest was made after police and later the prosecution received a tip from Crime Stoppers. Now the defense wants that same information to potentially help their case. But Crime Stoppers refused, arguing their sources must remain confidential, no matter what. So Judge Victoria Brennan asks Richard Maston, the executive director of the Miami Crime Stoppers Division, to appear in court, hoping he'll release the information. But Maston makes it clear that's not happening, despite the fact that he could potentially face charges if he refuses. He actually holds the information in his hand as he chats with a local news reporter. But just how far is this Crime Stopper willing to go to protect his source? Very far. Yes, very far. Maston noshes on the paper like it's an afternoon snack. To wrap things up, he shoots for 2. But when the hearing ends, the judge gives Maston something else to chew on. A fine of $500 plus a contempt of court charge that could land him in jail for a minimum of 2 weeks. Maston, however, will catch a break. He's sentenced to probation, but no jail time. He's also given a homework assignment when the judge orders him to write a report on anonymous tip laws. As for Alvarez, her cocaine charge was ultimately dropped. Next, we're in Castle Rock, Colorado, where 38-year-old Eric Jensen is awaiting resentencing for a crime he was involved in more than 2 decades earlier. At 17, Jensen watched as his friend 16-year-old Nathan Ibanez beat and strangled his mother, Julie Ibanez, to death. Jensen then helped his friend clean up the crime scene. Though Ibanez testified that Jensen had no part in the actual murder, both teens were tried as adults and convicted of first-degree murder. Jensen was charged under the felony murder rule. That places the same amount of guilt on an individual if he participated in the commission of a felony in which a death occurred, even if the defendant wasn't the one who killed the victim. Parole. 20 years later, Jensen was back for resentencing, thanks to a Supreme Court decision that retroactively allows juveniles previously sentenced to life without parole the opportunity for a new hearing. It's been a long, emotional journey for Jensen and his family, who were finally able to speak on their son's behalf.
This is the first time that his family's been able to appear in court and say anything about him.
Curtis Jensen told the court his son had been a model prisoner who earned his college degree and had inspired others to live a good life while behind bars. When Eric Jensen was given the chance to speak, he tearfully recalled the details from the night of the murder.
I sat 3 feet away from somebody who was done. I sat 3 feet away from her. And I didn't save her. I could have.
Fortunately for Jensen, Judge Teresa Slade can offer him parole. The problem is, under Colorado law, he would only be eligible after serving 40 years. But Jensen's attorney argues an exception should be made, especially considering recent developments in the case for his co-defendant, Nathan Ibanez.
Nate killed his mother in her apartment, and the governor has granted that he be eligible for parole at the end of next year.
Ibanez, the teen who physically murdered his own mother, had his sentence commuted by the governor. Meanwhile, Jensen, who did not actually attack the victim, may have to wait another 20 years for a chance at freedom. When the judge made her decision, no exception was made. Eric Jensen was allowed parole eligibility, but only after he served another 20 years in prison. Yet he and his family remained hopeful.
So we have hope that this is not the end. It's not the end of the courts. It's not the end of the legislature. Maybe not even the end with this district attorney.
And the hearing was not the end of Eric Jensen's story. Less than a year later, Colorado Governor Jared Polis granted him clemency. He was released from prison after having served more than 21 years.
How about that? I think I'll get real close to you and hop on you then. How's that? That video shows me in the worst possible light on my worst possible day, and that's not who I am.
Next, we go to Jacksonville, Florida, for a sentencing conducted over Zoom. The defendant, Deborah Jo Hunter, has pled no contest to misdemeanor assault, with management about an item she wanted to return. Things escalated for several minutes until a bystander, Heather Sprague, began recording the incident with her cell phone. It was early in the COVID pandemic, and Sprague was wearing a protective mask. Hunter was not, and when she realized she was being recorded, she was not happy.
Do you really need this? What do you want to do? Post it for you? How about that? I think I'll get real close to you and hop on you then. How's that?
Oh, wow.
Hunter coughed directly in Sprague's face.
Let's go.
What Hunter didn't realize is that Sprague is a recent cancer survivor. Knowing her immune system was compromised, Sprague quickly got tested for COVID. The results were negative. She reported the incident to police, and Hunter was charged with assault. Now Hunter appears virtually before Judge James Ruth to learn her punishment. She's facing a maximum sentence of 60 days in jail. When given a chance to speak, Hunter apologizes to Sprague, but mostly focuses on the fallout from the incident and the impact it's had on her and her own family.
I'm aware that my shame and regret will follow me the rest of my life. The reality is that my family has been permanently scarred. This incident occurred over 8 months ago, but my children just still continue to suffer the indignities that were caused by what I did. I think they're continually embarrassed. They're continually chastised and mocked. Each of my 3 children have lost nearly every friend that they've had because of me. They used to go to our community pool with their friends. Now they're not invited. We no longer take our family bike rides around the neighborhood. And it's clear that the majority of our neighbors no longer wish to associate with us on even the smallest of levels. I think the hardest part of this is that video shows me in the worst possible light on my worst possible day. And that's not who I am. And if I could take it all back, I obviously would take it all back. Everything just kept piling on and piling on and piling on, and I just kept trying to push it down. Unfortunately for Miss Sprague, she was the recipient of that, and for that I apologize.
Before Judge Ruth makes his ruling, the victim asks to make a statement.
The defendant's act of coughing in my face at the height of a pandemic was an act that was calculated to attack me at my weakest point, both physically and psychologically. I was stunned in the moment and increasingly fearful in the aftermath. Enough cough that her spittle landed on me. I worried for the health and safety of my family. I scrambled to find COVID testing that was not readily accessible at that time, and ultimately I paid out of pocket to be tested. That was not the knee-jerk reaction of an overprotective mama bear. It was an episode that was rooted in privilege and entitlement with an immunity to consequences. felt strongly at the time, and I continue to feel strongly today, that there should be some accountability for the actions of the defendant.
Next, it's the judge who has a few words about what he did and did not hear from the defendant.
What concerns me, she talked about what impact it had on her children and her family, but I haven't heard about the potential deadly impact this could have had on the victim. So I will adjudicate you guilty, place you on 6 months probation, also anger management, and 30 days Duval County Jail with credit for 1 day.
In addition to the sentence of 30 days in jail with 1 day served, Hunter must also pay a $500 fine and reimburse Sprague $150 for the out-of-pocket COVID test expense. Next, we're in Manatee County, Florida, for the sentencing of Anthony Kidd. The 23-year-old was arrested on a felony animal cruelty charge after his girlfriend reported he had injured her dog, Prince. 8 months earlier, the couple's son had accidentally eaten some dog feces in the backyard, causing Kidd to get angry and allegedly hit the pet. The veterinarian who conducted an examination would later testify the dog suffered blows to the head which led to a broken tooth, bloody nose, and swollen eye. Kidd pleaded no contest and is awaiting his fate from Judge Hunter Carroll. But when the judge sentences him to 364 days in jail, Kidd desperately begs for mercy. He reminds the judge that he has cancer, says he needs to be with his kids. Judge Carroll listens, but ultimately sticks to his decision. Tensions are high, and as deputies approach, Kidd attempts to make a break for it. But doesn't get very far. The officers then tell Judge Carroll to leave the courtroom, as the situation becomes potentially more dangerous. With tasers drawn and pointed at his stomach, Kidd shouts, "Do it! You're gonna have to kill me." But as they continue talking, tensions eventually die down. Deputies then inch closer and make their move. But Kidd manages to evade them once again, though only making it across the courtroom before 8 officers take him to the ground. But he's not done fighting. And it takes almost 4 minutes to finally subdue and carry him out of the courtroom and into custody. Kidd's charged with resisting arrest and sentenced to 11 months and 29 days to be served concurrently with the original sentence of 364 days for animal cruelty. He was also ordered to pay a $2,500 fine, submit to anger management treatment, and have no possession, care, or custody of domestic animals. That's it for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.